Good afternoon and welcome council members and members of the general public to this meeting of the Indiana Justice Reinvestment Advisory Council. I'd first like to take this opportunity to thank all of the council members or their designees for participating in this important meeting. My name is Christopher Goff and I serve on the Indiana Supreme Court, and I also serve as Chief Justice Loretta Rush's designee to chair Indiana's JRAC. Later on in the meeting, we were going to give the members or their designees an opportunity to provide a brief report out of any work or news that their agency might be carrying out that would be of benefit to JRAC. The first order of business for today's meeting is approval of the June 19th 2020 meeting minutes. So council members, prior to this afternoon's meeting, you should have received from April Dubree a copy of the minutes from the June 2020 meeting. If you've had an opportunity to review the minutes, I would entertain a motion to approve them.
So moved.
Thank you, Bernice. There's been a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the June 2020 JRAC meeting. Is there a second?
Seconded. Sorry.
Thank you, Mark. There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Then call all those in favor of approving the June 19th, 2020 JRAC minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes approved as presented. The next item on the agenda is a report from the JRAC's Quick Response Group. The last meeting, Mary Kay Hudson had suggested and was unanimously approved to form a quick response group to deal with items in anticipation of the upcoming legislative session, and also to look at some of the positive things that had happened over the past several months in terms of jail overcrowding, and several items of good work I think happened as a result of the quick response team's work. I wanted to first provide an update and an opportunity for discussion about two items in particular, and then once we've moved beyond that discussion, there were a number of items that the quick response team voted and approved for consideration of JRAC as a whole. And so when we get to those individual items, I'm going to ask for the quick response team or JRAC members who sponsored or was responsible for that part of the discussion to provide a brief report out to the council as a whole. But within the quick response group discussion, the first thing I'd like to bring to the council's attention is some work that was done by a small group in relation to case studies on local jail populations. And at this time, I'd ask Mary Kay Hudson, the Executive Director of the Indiana Office of Court Services, and Steve Luce as the Executive Director of the Indiana Sheriff's Association to provide a report on the work of the small group. Mary Kay or Steve?
Thank you, Justice Goff. Steve, if you don't mind, I'll take the lead and you can fill in. I think one of the things that we talked about at the last council meeting is, as part of the new JRAC configuration moving forward, we really wanted to be sure to take into consideration all the great work that was completed last year, both by JRAC and the pretrial and bail reform report, as well as the jail overcrowding task force. We realized that a lot of the work that had been completed before had been really well vetted as it relates to pretrial issues and jail overcrowding issues, and we wanted to build on that. But in addition to that, we found ourselves in different circumstances with the pandemic, and we've also found that counties have sort of accelerated some of their local conversations surrounding jail population and pretrial services, which matches up well with the discussions and the work that we've been doing over the years with Criminal Rule 26 and the pretrial pilot projects. So Steve provided some information to the quick response work group in the way of some current numbers or relatively recent numbers on all 91 jails across the state, and what those jails are reporting in terms of the reduction in their census on a regular basis. So this group, a smaller group of the quick response group, and certainly any JRAC member who is interested in participating, we would welcome you to the discussion, is in the process of reviewing the list of the 91 jails, those populations, and then comparing that relative to what we know is happening in those jurisdictions. Either they're an evidence-based decision-making county, they are a pretrial pilot county, we know that they are implementing pretrial services, or we also know that as a result of the pandemic, or maybe accelerated by the pandemic, they've been having local conversations to really focus on their jail populations. How can they reduce jail populations without compromising public safety? So we're going to identify a handful or two of these particular counties who've had these reductions, and we'd like to talk with them and their sheriffs and all the other stakeholders, including the courts, prosecutor's office, defense counsel, and supervision agencies, to see what they've been doing, both relative to Criminal Rule 26 as well as anything unique related to the pandemic. As a result of that, we're going to provide some case studies for the full council to consider, hopefully at the September 25th meeting. And what we're anticipating finding is that we'll have counties who are implementing practices that are very similar to EBDM, either because they've been trained in that, they've been an EBDM site, or they just have adopted that process and that approach to working with jail overcrowding. And from that, we will be able to provide recommendations to the council on any particular or additional recommendations that we may have regarding funding, legislative issues, or other matters that may help us respond to jail overcrowding. So Steve, and I'd like to offer Steve an opportunity to fill in anything that I've missed or to add to.
Thanks, Mary Kay. First of all, the information that I provided with the jail numbers, I've been communicating with Department of Corrections, and I think the sheet she has is probably about 10 days old to 2 weeks, and it reflects self-reported numbers. Remember, self-reported numbers to the DOC. Scott Brennicky was my contact person, but basically it shows we're around 4,000 offenders less right now compared to where we were in the beginning of the pandemic, or in April it was about 5,000. So there's been a slight uptick, but what we're trying to do also, Mary Kay and I, along with a couple other people, we've also had discussion with Devin McDonald with the Criminal Justice Institute, and they're tasked with collecting jail data also. So they are working with a couple of sheriff's offices in trying to collect some data that's requested under House Enrolled Act. I think it's 256. We've had a couple calls about that. So as Mary Kay was saying, and I think what we really need to continue to focus on is going back to the jail overcrowding report and what the findings were there, and really continue to keep that document flowing, because this is so important to not just sheriffs, but everybody, and to have these data numbers. I really believe that hopefully the counties will continue to collaborate and communicate and let the right people out. At the same time, keep the people who need to be in the jail, and always keep public safety as a priority. And then as we get to a later conversation, I wanted to bring up something I've been working with a company, many of you know Apris Health. They have a platform in their open beds. They're trying to develop actually what I think could be a pretty good discussion for JRAC members. And from the time they come in the jail to the time they're released, to where they could be provided with an open bed in a community or a hospital. It's pretty interesting data that they track with their programs. So I'd like to add that maybe to a conversation later. That could be something we could look into. So that's kind of my little report there.
Mary Kay and Steve, thank you very much for the work that you've done to keep us moving in the right direction and for the report out. Before we move on in the agenda, I would like to provide any of the council members or their designees an opportunity to ask any questions, Mary Kay or Steve, about the report. Okay. Hearing none, thank you again. And we'll look forward to hearing from you next month. The next item on the agenda was started as an idea for introducing some legislation by Representative Fry. I don't know that Representative Fry was able to join us this afternoon, but I believe Mary Kay may have a brief report on that agenda item before we move on to the discussion and vote of the legislative proposals. Mary Kay?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Justice Goff. As a result of the jail overcrowding task force, one of the recommendations was to really promote and provide consistent access to counsel at initial hearing, and it's one of the barriers that we've identified both in the pretrial side as well as the jail overcrowding task force report is one of the needs of many communities. So Representative Fry posed the idea of trying to expand access to representation at initial hearings for indigent clients. And suggested that we take a look at providing third-year law students with an ability to provide representation at that stage. So we are going to be looking into this and having some conversations with IPAC and the Public Defender Council, also looking at our rules that allow for certified legal interns. Certainly we want to make sure that individuals who are providing this service are qualified and or appropriately supervised during that process. So we're going to have some conversations with the various stakeholders to take a look at the feasibility of that, knowing that it would be probably really limited to the areas of the state that have law schools, but certainly if it's a mechanism by which we can expand the certified legal intern program and providing increased access to counsel at initial hearing, we certainly want to explore that as an option. So we'll provide additional information to the council at the September meeting.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Are there any questions for Mary Kay from members of the council? Thank you. Next on the agenda are discussion items or voting items for those topics or subjects that were worked on over the last several weeks by the Quick Response Group. And first on the agenda is a legislative item or proposed amendments to Indiana Code 3533.8 3.8. And I have on the agenda a report out from Senator Talion. Senator Talion, ma'am, I want to make sure that I'm up to speed with everything. I think that the last meeting there was a discussion about perhaps you meeting with Bernice Corley and Chris Naylor and perhaps some others to work towards some tweaking or agreement as to some language, or the efforts to reach agreement as to some language. And I understand that maybe there wasn't an opportunity to meet over the past week. So is this still something that we wanted to discuss today?
Yeah, I don't know that we need to, thank you. I don't know that we need to discuss it today. Bernice and I had a meeting about something else, but we have a meeting set with Bernice and Chris Naylor, myself, and Legislative Services for next Monday. So we're not, don't take us off the agenda, but we're not ready yet.
Okay, well, fair enough. That's better said than my attempt, but I wanted to make sure that we didn't overlook it if I misunderstood. So with your permission then, Senator, we'll just go ahead and table this discussion until next month. And we thank you and Bernice and Chris for your efforts to work towards some consensus on this proposal. The next item that I wanted to bring to the council's attention is something that was really pretty exciting. I think that there was consensus reached among the work group on some items with respect to driving while suspended. And I'd asked for a report out from any of the council members who are working on the driving while suspended to fill in the larger council as a whole as to some progress that was made with respect to driving while suspended. Chris?
Thank you, Justice Goff. I'd be happy to report out. There's been a work group focused on reducing the number of suspended drivers in the state of Indiana. And this work group's been working for several months in anticipation of the 2021 legislative session. Just some quick data points. There are over 900,000 current driver license suspensions in the state of Indiana that impact a little over 300,000 individuals. So the 300,000 individuals may have multiple license suspensions, which kind of goes why we're so concerned about this impact on Hoosier drivers. And we've collected some data, and Chris Daniels, who is the IPAC traffic safety resource prosecutor, has kind of spearheaded this group, working with public defenders and representatives from the Office of Judicial Administration and Bureau of Motor Vehicles and some others. And 80% of these suspensions are due to failing to appear for a traffic ticket proceeding, failure to pay a civil traffic ticket, and failure to have insurance. So that's 80% of the 300,000 or so folks. That's the reason for those suspensions. And it's complicated. There are a lot of tentacles to this, but that's what we want to address is to make it easier for people to get a driver's license, reduce multiple fees or multiple suspensions that can accumulate during this process, and to reduce reinstatement fees, which in many cases become just completely onerous and almost impossible to pay to get a license. That's the project in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you, Chris. Are there any questions for Chris from members of the council or any designees?
One question.
Yeah, please, Jay.
Justice Goff. Hi, everybody. I'm Jay Chaudhary, the director of the Division of Mental Health and Addictions. For 10 years before this, I was in the world of civil legal aid, and one of the primary areas which we practice and help folks out was with driver's licenses. So I was just wondering if you all had consulted with any civil legal aid folks on these conversations, or if that's maybe a post-adoption conversation.
Jay, I don't know offhand, but that's certainly something that we need to check out. So I will definitely check out civil legal aid and see if they would like to have some input.
Okay, thank you. And again, thank you so much for taking this on. This is a huge barrier for people that are trying to get their lives put back together. So.
Hey, I can answer that. At this point, there has not been anybody involved. It's been like state agencies. But as Chris said, that makes total sense to engage legal services. So as Chris said, either I would assume Chris Daniels would be in touch with you to get just like who you think makes sense as a contact. I don't know if you think we should just go to John, or if there's a particular attorney you think we should talk to.
Yeah, you can just shoot me an email and I'll make the connection. Thanks.
It's truly been a team effort, and adding someone else to the team would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. And thank you for your work in that area. I know it's significant. Any other questions from members of the council? Well, hearing none, before we move on, I just want to thank everyone who's been involved in this effort so far. And, this was, of all of the items that were discussed over the course of the past several weeks in the quick response group, this was probably far and above the one that had the most consensus around it as being a good idea and low-hanging fruit that would benefit a lot of Hoosiers. So I just want to thank everyone for collaborating to come up with what I'm confident will help a lot of people out and make Indiana a better place. So appreciate it, and we'll look forward to hearing more next month as we work towards some consensus language. So thank you. The next item, and it's really a set of items. I have 4 in particular, were funding items for the upcoming legislative session. It goes without saying, but for posterity, we should probably just mention that the circumstances involved with the pandemic have put real strains on state budgets, Indiana's included. And so with that in mind, some of the items that have been discussed in the quick response work group have included really strategies or priorities for funding requests in the upcoming legislative session. And there were several good discussions had, and there was, I believe, by and large, consensus reached on many of the discussions related to funding. But in order to break these down, I'm going to ask some of the individual council members who made them to report out. And first, on behalf of the Public Defender Commission, a request for reimbursement for misdemeanors. I think Mark Rutherford was going to discuss this. Are you?
Yes.
Are you on, Mark?
I am on. So yes, the commission brought this up, or I, on behalf of the commission, and told the promoted this. This is one thing we have been promoting, and that is misdemeanor reimbursement. Misdemeanors touch on so many people's lives. It's oftentimes the first time that somebody has a contact with the criminal justice system, and there's probably should be an effort to do it well on behalf of the defendants, because it can affect their liberty. It can affect things like driver's licenses. It can affect educational loans, employment opportunities, etc. So it seems like that there should be standards applied to the misdemeanor council at this very oftentimes first step, so that maybe there won't be a second step, and things that hopefully would over time have a good cost effect. The Public Defender Commission, we do a lot of research on our statistics, on data. We're getting closer and closer to what looks to be a trend that commission counties that get reimbursements from the commission for their public defenders, the rate of recidivism is down and different from those counties that are not in the commission. Now, we've got lots of variables we're still looking at, but the news is something's maybe happening there. And anecdotally, we're hearing that it may be because attorneys have more time with their clients, get to know what at sentencing should be recommended, get to talk to the prosecutor and the judge about that, and maybe we are getting better sentences when there's a conviction. Those are things that we're going towards and keep working towards. But having the standards for this misdemeanor, because the effects on their lives can be as serious as felonies in many cases, especially the lower level felonies, to their lives. To have that type of counsel, we think is a very important thing on that. We know it would mean more money involved. I know that we've done some preliminary look on what we think would be the increased cost to the counties. Last I saw, about 44 of the counties we expect would already be in compliance. Some of the other counties are closer to compliance than not. A handful, 7 or 8, would have to increase their budget 2 to 5% for public defender services. But we think that there would be some corresponding savings, such as fewer people in jail who shouldn't be in jail, better program selection, those type of things that we think it might actually end up, if done correctly and well, to not really increase the county's costs in the long run. Maybe a little short upfront stuff in there. So we want the whole JRAC Council to consider this as a recommendation, and something that the standards be applied when it comes to caseloads, pay, et cetera, that we apply in felonies. It would have an effect, but it would mean, and we hope, would eventually be able to show that it would actually result in a more efficient, better court system. Hopefully it would reduce recidivism, and is just an all-around good idea to have quality public defenders. It just ripples across the whole system when you have good attorneys in all aspects of the case.
Thank you for that report out, Mark. Are there any questions from council members or designees for Mark regarding his presentation, his report out, and request for JRAC support recommending funding for misdemeanors and inclusion in public defender standards? Hearing none. Mark, are you asking then for a vote of the full council with respect to your request?
Yes, I would ask the full council to consider it. And hopefully there's enough information that's been relayed in the attachments to the in the past. And this has been a high priority for us, at least 2 legislative sessions, making our case for this. So we would like the whole council to approve this as a priority, and to the legislature as something to consider.
I'm going to then, with your permission, take your request as a formal motion.
Yes.
And if there's a second.
Second.
Hearing Bernice has a second. So the motion before JRAC is expression of support for a request for misdemeanor funding and inclusion in public defender standards for misdemeanors. Any further discussion?
Justice Goff, unfortunately, I will have to refrain from any voting on proposed legislation just because of my position in state budget agency. So I did just want to note that I won't be able to vote on this.
Understood, Kirsten. Thank you.
I'll also be abstaining.
Jay?
Justice Goff, I'll also have to abstain.
Yeah, so will I.
I will as well.
This is David Botler. If I don't have to abstain, but Andrew Cullen did send me some information this week. I haven't had a chance to check with all the counties who may have to have a slight increase in public defense spending locally to be in compliance. But having said that, we did support it last year. Our policy committee is still meeting, but yeah, I'll be happy to vote on it in support of it, with a little bit of the caveat that things may change and priorities may change between now and when the budget gets released. But I think in the long run, it could save some of the county's money by reducing their jail population.
I would also like to say that I'm going to vote to support this, but I have a number of remarks that are coming after this. So subject to my remarks, I'm going to vote yes.
Well, with the abstentions, my only concern is whether or not we have a quorum of members available to vote in support. Be happy to call for the question, or if we wanted to table this until September, I'd be open to that as well. The understanding, I think Senator Talion, among others, have indicated support for this in the legislature. Perhaps a recognition that times will be tight.
Justice Goff, Steve Luce here. I would recommend we table it till September.
Do we not have a quorum after the abstentions?
I'm trying to do a count with the abstentions. So I don't know if April is on or Jenny is on to give recording the minutes, but I want to make sure that.
Justice Goff, this is Jenny. I counted 11 members present and 5 abstaining, so I think we're good.
Okay. Well, we still have a quorum then, apparently, to go ahead and indicate some support for that. We do have Steve's request to table that. So Steve, are you willing to withdraw that request and go ahead and go ahead? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and withdraw it. I wasn't sure where we were. Now we know how many are there.
Go ahead and call the question then. All those in favor for the request indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? So the motion carries then by all those did not abstain. So, Mark, I think that everyone recognizes the value in having quality representation. One understands the constitutional mandate that we operate under to provide that. So we appreciate your advocacy for it. And hopefully the legislature can find a way to fund it.
Yes, thank you, Justice Goff, and everybody for considering it. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is Representative McNamara. I have to leave for another meeting. I know one of the issues on there is on the agenda is for courts and criminal code update. We're just going to have our first meeting on September 15th. We will look at consent for sexual encounters and then start a review of 1006. But with that, I have to go do my other
Thank
job.
you for your hard work, Representative McNamara, and for your hard work on the quick response group.
No problem. You guys have a good day.
You too. The next two agenda items, I believe, are going to be reported on by Mary Kay Hudson. So we first have pretrial services and then evidence-based decision-making training and technical assistance. Mary Kay?
Thank you, Justice Goff. In our various discussions that we've had about, again, the jail overcrowding task force and the JRAC pretrial and bail reform report, there's been significant conversation about the importance of not only enhancing the pretrial services that are in place now in multiple jurisdictions, but expanding access to pretrial services, pretrial assessment, indigent defense counsel, appropriate levels of the state to represent or to be present at hearings. And so we've recognized through the implementation of Criminal Rule 26 in pretrial that we do need additional funds to be able to support this initiative statewide. The Department of Correction, through its community corrections grant funds and specifically through the 1006 funds, has been very generous in supporting many of our local pretrial services programs. The Indiana Supreme Court has provided a fair amount of funding to help programs get started. I would estimate that between the DOC and the Supreme Court, there's probably already between $5 and $6 million going annually to support pretrial services. That includes pretrial services officers to conduct assessments and provide supervision. In some cases, we have funded a part-time deputy prosecutor, defense counsel, other supervision aspects. So we would, and we want to continue these practices. We want to enhance these practices. Ultimately, a best practice in pretrial is for pretrial services to conduct risk assessments on all individuals who are booked into the jail. We really don't have the resources to do that now in the existing counties. We'd like to expand that and then bring on new counties as well. So in terms of the kind of the prevalence of interest in pretrial services, we have 29 counties who have submitted to the Indiana Office of Court Services either an application to be a certified pretrial services program. Judge Spitzer's program in Grant County is certified, for example, or they are in the planning stages to become a certified pretrial services program. Certainly, we encourage that practice. We encourage counties wanting to sign on and become certified programs, but there is a level of an expectation in certain practices that really does require some additional resources at the local level, such as staff to conduct assessments and supervision, access to counsel, prosecutors who can screen cases and be present at hearings. So there's a pretty significant fiscal impact to this. So Justice Goff, I think the quick response work group, there was consensus among the group to support a request for additional funding specifically for pretrial services. That's not to say that we would not also support any other funding that might be available for community supervision or 1006 funded programs, but we just had a specific emphasis on pretrial services because of Criminal Rule 26 and the jail overcrowding issue.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Are there any members of the council or designees that have any questions for Mary Kay? She's indicated the consensus among the quick response group was to support request for additional funding to support pretrial services, largely because of the, in that particular, largely because of the emphasis that's been put on pretrial services over the past couple of years. Are there any questions, any further discussion? Hearing none, Mary Kay, then would you also be requesting for a vote of the full council to support additional funding for pretrial services?
Yes, Justice Goff, I would request support from the council to support a proposal for additional funding for pretrial services.
I'd make that motion, Justice Goff.
So we have a motion before us by Judge Spitzer. Thank you, Judge Spitzer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Senator Talion. It's been moved and seconded that the full JRAC support additional funding for pretrial services. Call for the question then. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Justice Goff, I will need to abstain from this as well.
Okay. Before I call for the question, let me step back and offer the opportunity for any members who need to abstain from the vote. Make a record of that.
I will also need to abstain from voting.
Kevin and Chris, thank you.
I will need to.
Same. Jason J.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Jay.
Justice Goff, same for me, Kirsten at SBA.
And
Thank you.
Kirsten, thank you. So I believe we've got all the same members that had to abstain from the last vote, or indicating their intention to abstain from this vote. I'm going to be calling, in all likelihood, for the same question with respect to, well, we'll just go one at a time because one may not be a funding issue. So with respect to this issue, then all those not abstaining, please indicate your favor by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, motion carries. Probably as much as any court reform initiative I've been involved in on my 21st year as an Indiana judicial officer, this has been a team effort, a multidisciplinary team effort. So everyone who represents an agency who's been involved in this work, thank you. There's much more work to be done, but this is really going to be a game changer for Indiana in terms of criminal justice. So thank you. Mary Kay, I'm going to ask now that you also give an update with respect to the quick response group's work on EBDM training and technical assistance.
Thank you, Justice Goff. Related to the work on pretrial, which originated, or largely the pretrial pilot project originated with our evidence-based decision-making initiative. The quick response group also discussed the importance of being able to provide training and technical assistance to local jurisdictions as they take a look at these issues surrounding evidence-based decision-making, one of those issues being pretrial services. When we launched the evidence-based decision-making initiative as a state in 2015, we received significant technical assistance from the National Institute of Corrections, and the state EBDM team, as we call it, had provided significant resources within its own budgets and within their own agencies to be able to launch the statewide EBDM initiative. We no longer receive technical assistance from the National Institute of Corrections, but we do have a roadmap for moving forward in terms of how and in what way we want to be able to support local jurisdictions in implementing the evidence-based decision-making framework. That will require additional resources for any number of our agencies as we look for staff members who can provide in-person local technical assistance in the way of facilitation for counties who are implementing the EBDM framework, as well as various training needs that those local jurisdictions may have, either as a team or as individual professionals. So for example, we may need additional resources for the Public Defender Council to provide support and training to public defenders, IPAC for prosecutors, courts, and so on. So we would request the council's support for additional financial resources to be able to expand our evidence-based decision-making initiative specifically for the purposes of providing facilitation, training, and technical assistance.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Are there any questions from members of the council or their designees with respect to Mary Kay's request for support of additional funding? Yes, Senator Talion.
Do we have a dollar amount that goes with this?
We have not identified a dollar amount at this point, but we could develop one and provide that for the council's review at the next meeting, if that's helpful.
I guess my question has to do with, this is the third request for money, and none of the requests for money have come with dollar amounts, although I remember ballpark figures for some of the others from prior budget requests. This one I have no idea about. And I guess my only hesitation is that I can vote yes to support the concept, but voting to add dollars when we've got two other things to add dollars doesn't give anybody a sense of priority. And I have no way of knowing, you know, how much money you're talking about.
Senator Talion, I would project that we would probably, at least initially, be talking about primarily personnel. So if I had to estimate, maybe two to four staff members, where those individuals may be located, whether that's at court services or with one of our partner agencies, to really be dedicated to a coordinated approach in facilitation and technical assistance. When we launched the statewide EBDM initiative, we had several technical assistance experts who helped counties really kind of get things off the ground and get them going. But eventually, and we would anticipate those individuals would do that, and they would eventually transition to working with other counties who were brought on board. But that would be an estimate. Certainly we would, if it was one, if it was two, if it was four, we would be very grateful. Because we do have some internal capacity to take that on. We don't have the internal capacity to take it to scale like we really want to across all 92 counties. So that would be my estimate. I don't know if other council members would have anything to add to that in terms of their own agency needs. That would be a really great start.
Okay.
Can I just, if I could, Justice Goff, speak in favor of the need for it. I think some of you may know that Grant County was the first to participate in the EBDM process in Indiana. We were one of 7 in the country. And without facilitation and technical assistance, it's very difficult for this to happen, because the idea of EBDM is to operate as a system differently than you have in the past. It's a collaborative model, and it requires you to interact in ways that we're not used to doing as a local government. And it also requires you to kind of challenge you to handle situations and proposals in a different way. And so facilitation amongst the different stakeholders is really important to get the lines of communication open. Now, after you do it for a while, you kind of get used to it, and you can do it, but it's not the way we're initially built. And so our experience in Grant County was that technical assistance and facilitation was really extremely helpful. The other thing is that the technical assistance allows you to do is really, once you identify an area that you want to make improvements in your system, you can get sort of subject matter experts to come in and give you some information in terms of what's out there, what changes can be made, what's been done in other jurisdictions, what is the research telling you about the changes that need to be made. So it's really going to be crucial if we want to move forward and expand EBDM to have training, technical assistance, facilitation. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen organically.
And I would offer one more frame of reference is that our office also houses the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. And we have staff who work very closely with our JDAI counties who provide a very similar function that I would be proposing for the evidence-based decision-making. Again, as I said, we have some internal capacity to those, if staff was, whether they're with court services or another agency, we can work together with them. We have a significant knowledge base of what's happening in our jurisdictions. We know a lot of the key players, but really it's just kind of the time spent building and developing teams and helping them develop local policies and procedures that we would love to have more resources to support.
And Senator Talion, that's a great question. You take me back to my county council days at budget time, and it's about that time of year. And the only thing I would want to offer to you in terms of the importance of this work is just that those folks that Mary Kay and Judge Spitzer are talking about are really the people that can go into a local community and assist the stakeholders in becoming fully in alignment, full fidelity with everything that JRAC has tried to champion in terms of the jail overcrowding initiatives, evidence-based decision-making initiatives. And, you know, I was, for a number of years, Grant County's kind of poor cousin to the north. I would go and see how Judge Spitzer was doing it to get an idea of how I could maybe put something like that together with very little resources. And, you know, the funny thing is that it can work even with next to nothing. At least it can work much better than business as usual. And those folks that work in Mary Kay's office can really come in, meet a community where it's at, and help make things significantly better and significantly much more, at least in alignment with best practices. And at least from my standpoint, you know, 10, 15 years from now, some of those investments are going to be the things that are going to save Indiana big in the long run. So we understand times are tight, but those are some things that have, at least in my experience, been very good investments for Indiana. So we'd be happy to assist you, though, as you're looking to make a good decision on behalf of Indiana taxpayers. Are there any other questions on behalf of council members or their designees for Mary Kay with respect to her request for training and technical assistance? So I'm going to call for the question again, and before I do so, I'm going to ask Kirsten, do you wish to abstain from this vote as well?
Unfortunately, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I understand. Thank you. And Chris, I'd ask the same. Do you wish to abstain as well, ma'am?
Yes, sorry.
No, not at all. Nick, do you wish to abstain?
Yeah, I apologize.
Jay, do you wish to abstain?
Yes, sir.
And Devin, you wish to abstain as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. If I missed anybody else that needs to abstain, please indicate.
Justice Goff, I don't need to abstain, but I wonder if with Representative McNamara getting off the call, if we still have enough for a quorum.
Good question.
Unless you believe otherwise, Justice Goff, yes, I believe we still have a quorum.
Okay. Well, April Dubry is one of those people that I just was speaking so highly of, and so I've learned to rely on her opinion and advice on these things. So I'm going to say we still have a quorum. Is there a motion then before me to indicate on behalf of JRAC an expression of support for additional funding for training and technical assistance for evidence-based decision-making?
I make a motion. Justice Goff, this is Adam McQueen.
Adam, thank you. Adam
Second.
knows what I'm talking about. Is there a second?
I'll second, Justice Goff.
Thank you, Judge. So it's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. And then Mary Kay, the final item that we have on the agenda as a potential funding item was for eligibility for recovery works, misdemeanor eligibility for recovery works. And I know in our preliminary discussions, you'd indicated a hope that perhaps Representative Steuerwald would speak, but I don't believe he was able to join us this afternoon. Is that right?
That's correct.
Is there anyone else who wanted to make a statement or a presentation or a report out on behalf of this request by the quick response group? Mary Kay, are you able to?
I can talk a little bit about it with the caveat that I don't know that much, so it's kind of dangerous. I know a dangerous amount about this. So I have no official position on it. However, I think it's important to note about recovery. So for those you don't know, I'm almost a year in, which is amazing. Although the last 6 months have been mostly focused on COVID. And so, I don't have a whole lot of history necessarily with Recovery Works, although I've heard, I think, a lot of those things. And I think that it's been very clear to me that and I think most, apologies for those of you that know this, but the biggest challenge with Recovery Works, which is a fantastic program and a very much needed program, has been that we've done such a good job at FSSA of filling gaps in treatment that a program that's designed to fill gaps in treatment is always going to be a challenge to administer. But one gap we have not come close to figuring out is this very big one of what to do with misdemeanors. So with no official position, I think it would be time and money well spent.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah, thanks for all the work you've done throughout this and your tenure before the pandemic hit, and connecting people with this necessary services. Judge Representative Steuerwald really spoke very eloquently last week about the benefits of being able to connect more people to these services to keep their lives intact before they go off the rail. And I mean, there's significant benefits. Obviously, we're in a budget crunch, and that's a concern. But Mary Kay, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a little bit of history to add to what Jay said. There is support generally. The General Assembly passed a bill a couple of years ago that authorized DMHA to establish a pilot project for misdemeanors and recovery works. The unfortunate part about it at the time is that there was not any additional funding associated with that. So I think there's a strong recognition that individuals charged with misdemeanors benefit from increased access to treatment and services. We know that charge alone does not dictate the level of need when it comes to substance use disorder and other behavioral health disorders. I think in terms of funding, the specific question for Senator Talion posed, I think originally the request was for $5 million to support the misdemeanor pilot project. So that could be a starting point for the discussion, or at least a range to consider when we look at what dollar amount would be helpful. I think we probably can appreciate that there are far more misdemeanors in need of services than $5 million would support, but it would be a good start. And then there could be maybe the development of the pilot project that was contemplated in that bill that was passed a couple of years ago to really flesh that out a little bit more.
Thank you, Mary Kay.
The only thing I will add to that is that we are on track to have the required report regarding recidivism outcomes and other outcomes for Recovery Works. Hopefully, definitely by the deadline, but hopefully you'll leave it a little before then. So, there should be quite a bit of information for the legislature to use to make their decision. So if that makes a difference.
Thank you, Jay. Any questions for Jay or Mary Kay with respect to the request of the quick response group for additional support for Recovery Works and misdemeanor eligibility?
Justice Goff, Judge Spitzer, I'm a little bit of two minds on this from the standpoint that I don't know that my experience has been that there's insufficient funding for felonies for Recovery Works. And what I would really be concerned about is if the legislative response to our request would say, I'm going to throw misdemeanors in and leave the funding at the current level, because that would be a step backward and not a step forward, in my opinion. So I think that with that caveat, I think the other side of the coin is that many offenses that used to be felonies are now misdemeanors as a result of our state criminal justice reform, including a lot of possession offenses of some pretty significant street drugs. And so we do see as a result of that, we see increased need for misdemeanors. But, again, with the caveat that I think that funding, there's still room for additional funding to meet the need at the felony level. And then also, if we were to include the misdemeanors, that not dilute funding for felony Recovery Works. So I guess those would be my thoughts.
They're good thoughts. Thank you. Anything else?
Justice Goff, this is Chris Naylor, Prosecuting Attorneys Council. I appreciate Mary Kay talking about that pilot program. The jail overcrowding task force was very specific in supporting funding for misdemeanors for recovery works and referencing that pilot program. So I'm glad Mary Kay brought that up. It is somewhat targeted to a pilot project. I don't recall the details of the pilot, but I just would point that out, that was in the jail overcrowding task force report.
Thank you for that clarification, Chris. And just for the members' benefit, Mary Kay, that's specifically what you're talking about?
Yes, sir. And Chris is correct. It was targeted. It was subject to the development by DMHA. Presumably, JRAC would have some influence into the development of that pilot project. I mean, I think when the original request was made a couple of years ago for some funding, it was specifically to address Judge Spitzer's concerns, that it would be additional funding that was earmarked specifically for that pilot project versus taking money that had already been budgeted and previously used for felons and diverting that to misdemeanors. So that would be the suggestion that I would offer to this group, that with those provisions in place, that it would be additional funds as opposed to diverted funds.
With that clarification, then if there are any other questions, I don't want to cut off discussion, but I would entertain a motion, or Mary Kay would be happy to take your request and clarification as the motion. Would you like me to do so?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second that motion.
Okay. I heard Senator Talion first. I'm going to go ahead then for purpose of record. And Kirsten, you wish to be abstain from the vote?
Yes, please. Thank you.
And Chris as well?
Yes, please.
Nick as well?
Yes.
Jay as well?
Painfully, yes.
Evan as well?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Senator Talion, I know that you are pressed for time this afternoon. I have you, if you have a minute, on our agenda to just give a brief report out with respect to your discussions and concerns with respect to the upcoming budget. Can I trouble you for that report, ma'am?
So I just, and I'm glad that Judge Spitzer brought up the question that he just brought up, because that has been concerning me as well. So let me just say that you know, that kind of dilution of money could also very well happen with any of your other funding requests, especially the reimbursements on the misdemeanors, and you know, that if we add misdemeanors and we don't add money, then you're going to be on dilution of the money for everything, and you're going to probably run into proration issues. So, and the reason I say that, and so, you know, the question is there going to be any more money? Now, I'm not, you know, I'm not, who's that guy in Vegas who makes all the predictions? I'm not him, but I can tell you this. You know, we just had a closeout on the June 30th. We were down a bunch of money, somewhere in the area of $900 million. We were down. A big bunch of that money was because we had deferred income tax payments until July. So we, you know, the good news is that we took in a bunch of that money, maybe more than we expected that we might. Okay, so I see Dave Bodorf sort of laughing here. You know, we took in some of the money. We didn't lose it all. However, that doesn't tell us anything about what the revenue forecast is going to be for the next 2 years, when we're going to take a hit on a lot of income, retail, and other corporate taxes. So, you know, normally we do a budget expecting a 2 to 3% growth rate, right? I'm expecting that we could have a 3 to 5% down rate, which is going to mean that there's not going to be any more money. We may all have to be cutting money. I'm just throwing that out there. That's my expectation. It's pretty pessimistic, but that's where it is. So while you've got whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 proposals for programs that add money, I agree that we should keep them out there. And that's why I voted yes. I agree that we should keep them out there to keep people and the General Assembly aware that these are continuing problems that haven't gone away. On the other hand, I am saying to this group, I sure hope that at some point, maybe closer to, well, we're going to get a revenue forecast in September, then we'll get another one in December. I sure hope that at some time before the General Assembly really gets going in the budget, that this group can sit down and talk about priorities, because we haven't mentioned those. You know, we haven't mentioned what are your dollar asks and what are your priorities. So, you know, that's the unfortunate news and predictions that I have. Nick the Greek, right? Isn't that who it was? Nick the Greek? Yeah. Anyway, I'm not Nick the Greek, but I'm looking at what I expect will be a real down year for budget, and you guys are going to have to come up with priorities and how much of this can we do right now without new money. Sorry.
No, there's no need to apologize, Senator. We need to hear that, and we value your input and your wisdom on this. I want to be conscious of your time before the senator has to step off. Are there any questions for her about what she's just reported out on?
Yeah, and I think somebody from budget agency's on here, but yeah, Dave, yeah.
Yeah, no, I wasn't laughing at what you were saying. I was shaking my head in agreement about the delayed income taxes that came in July, and better than maybe some had anticipated. But I agree, it's going to be a very difficult budget year. I know most of the state agencies have been instructed to cut funding by about 15%, some a little bit less than that. So agree, it's going to be a very difficult budget year going forward, and new requests I'm sure will be well back at the end of the line versus just trying to maintain status quo as best we can. But I think a lot of these provisions that we've discussed today could end up saving money in the long run, which is why we're supportive of a lot of these provisions. So,
thank you for your input, Dave, throughout. Thank you for your participation. Kirsten, I know that you have limitations on what you can discuss, but I think Mary Kay had just reached out to you before. I want to acknowledge that you're here on behalf of the Budget Office participating. Statutory members designee. Is there anything that you wish to add to the discussion?
Yeah, I think this is a great point to bring up. We did instructions for the next biennium do instruct every single state agency to develop a budget fiscal year 21. That's on both general and dedicated funds. That's not an easy task. Historically, like Senator Talian has said, that's been a 2 to 3% reserve, and so 15% is really, really difficult. That's when agencies have to start making some very, very difficult decisions. And along those lines, we've also put in the budget instructions for agencies to identify programs, different operations, things that they can basically propose discontinuing that would equate to 10 to 15% savings, but really we've asked them any type of savings you can find to definitely put on the table. Agencies still have the flexibility. We call it a change package. It's where agencies request, increased spending to increase their appropriation, but those are never guaranteed to be approved. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a really, really difficult budget development cycle for the agencies. And then also as we gear up for going into session, and also like Senator Tallien said, we are planning on doing that September revenue forecast, and then also one in December. But right now it's not looking good as far as revenue goes. Yeah. And I will also add that we do have those CARES Act dollars, but we can't build a budget with them. We have until the end of December of calendar year 2020, so fiscal year 21 to spend them, but we are not able to supplant or build a budget with them.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, I need to leave. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Senator Tallien. Well, members, I didn't get a chance to confirm with her, but you've heard her recommendation. I think it's a good one, that when we get a little bit further on and closer to the legislative session, that it's probably a worthwhile endeavor to look at some of these requests and determine whether or not there might be a priority ask, in particular with respect to these items that could have a chance of having dollars diluted in different areas. So I would just suggest that we might add that as an agenda item in an upcoming meeting, or perhaps there's an interest among members to have some further discussion with the quick response group. As we have some more information, maybe we could adjust some of our suggestions going into the legislative session. But thank you, Dave and Kirsten, for your input. It's very helpful.
This is Goff. I do have one comment on that, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Without commenting on any sort of specifics with budgets, but as a potential topic for the quick response group moving forward, I do think within the systems that we are talking about, that we do leave, for example, federal money on the table because of the setting in which people receive treatment or services. And I'm wondering if that's not worth an exploration within this particular group. So,
well, I think the answer is yes. I mean, obviously, in this environment in particular, so many of the meetings that all of us have been engaged in have been, at least in part, focused on trying to predict where some of these federal monies can be connected and what strings might be attached to them. So I think that it certainly is worth our while to be looking in earnest at these outside sources of money to make sure that as little as possible is left on the table. So Jay, to the extent that you're able, I'm going to call for the question at the end of the meeting as to whether or not the quick response group should continue. I think that that's probably reason enough in and of itself that it should, at least at some level, so that we can explore that issue. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing I'll say about, and I'm super steeped in budgets because I've been working on fulfilling Kristen's agency's request over the last couple, especially the last week or so. And I would just sort of challenge us to think about things that don't cost money. There are so many things we can do in terms of tightening up linkages or building collaborations that, still remain to be seen on the local levels. And I think we're actively working on some of those suggestions and proposals from the areas that within which we oversee. But I think that that's going to be the answer for us, is that, we just throwing our hands up and saying there's no money is not going to work. I think we owe it to everybody to figure out how to do things that that don't necessarily cost money, and in fact, as David said, may actually save money in the long run.
Love it. I think that that's exactly right. Good discussion. If there's nothing else specific to the budgetary presentation, I'd like to turn our attention then to agenda item 5, which is member report outs. And I'm first going to ask for a report from Nick Stamakin as proxy for Doug Hunsinger on behalf of Governor Holcomb. Nick?
Thank you, Justice Goff, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Nick Stamakin with the Drug Prevention, Treatment, and Enforcement Team in the Governor's Office. Last week, Indiana's Commission on Combat Drug Abuse convened virtually where we made 2 key announcements. The first announced a partnership between the Division of Mental Health and Addiction and Mental Health America of Indiana that will expand access to peer recovery support through the Indiana Recovery Network. The expansion is funded by a $1 million SAMHSA grant and will add 40 new peer recovery specialists to 16 organizations within the network, strengthening our recovery support infrastructure across the state. The second announcement was a release of our August 2020 Next Level Recovery Progress Report. The report provides detailed graphics, data, and updates on state initiatives tackling substance use disorder. And you guys can access the progress report on our website's homepage at recovery.in.gov. Those are really the primary updates I had, and thank you all for letting me share this with you this afternoon.
Nick, thank you for that report, and thank you for all the tremendous work you're doing. Are there any questions for Nick from members of the council? Hearing none. We heard from Representative McNamara before she had to get off the phone to work her day job, running a school. Were we able to connect with Representative Hatcher? Okay. I'm going to next then go to the Senate Corrections and Criminal Law Committee. We were able to hear from Senator Talion. Is Senator Young on the line? Okay. Next, going to go to the Public Defender Commission. I know that Mark Rutherford is on the line. Mark, do you have a report out?
Yes, I do, Justice Goff. Sorry to take so long to get to the unmute. On July 24th, the Commission released the Indiana Project, and this was a analysis of the Indiana Public Defense System and attorney workload standards. We worked with the ABA Standing Committee on Legal Aid and Indigent Defendants and with Crow LLP to study this issue. And we had some interesting things that are in there that will help guide the Commission as it sets standards on how much time a private and public attorney should spend on average with providing constitutionally effective representation. And it also looked into what historically have been our caseloads for public defense in Indiana. And this is an area where I'm very proud of for the Commission leading the charge on this, getting data together, trying to find out what really is going on there and what the standards should be based on. There were some surprises in there, of course there would be, but I think the Commission has its work cut out for us to evaluate the results of this and determine what should be the caseload standards for how much work, the workload of an attorney. And right before we did that, we also had another project going on where we released Indiana Public Defense overhead costs, and many of us anecdotally were not surprised by some of the results, but it looks like that when you figure in overhead costs to public defenders, especially those who've taken contracts, that they're not making a lot of money beyond their overhead on it. So that was a very interesting findings in that. You can find them on the Indiana Public Defender Commission website, on the state of Indiana's webpage for the Indiana Public Defender Commission, available to the public, available for all to view. Our next meeting is September 23rd, 2022 p.m. of all the members of the commission. And that's kind of the exciting stuff, at least to commission members, that's been going on since our last meeting. Thank you, Justice Goff.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for that report and for your hard work on behalf of Commission. I'd now ask for a report out from Judge Spitzer on behalf of the Indiana Judges Association.
Thank you, Justice Goff. So we have begun working with the lobbyist in order to monitor proposed legislation, and we appreciate our other partners on JRAC sharing notes if they have concerns or issues regarding proposed legislation that they think would be of interest to the Judges Association. We hope to work together with you on that. We unfortunately won't be able to have a meeting of our 500 plus judges that we typically have at the annual conference this year. Our Board of Managers will be meeting in September, and so there may be more to report at our next JRAC meeting. But for the moment, that's kind of really all that we have to discuss at this time.
Well, thank you, Judge Spitzer. I now ask for a report from David Bottorff on behalf of the Association of Indiana Counties. David?
Sure, thanks. We remain very interested in the decrease in the jail population that's occurred since mid-March, and notifying our members that that's happened and encourage them to talk locally with their justice partners, I'll call them, as to what they can do to try to keep that population as low as possible. And again, make sure people, only the people that need to be in the jail are in the jail. And that just helps with the finances so much. And of course, it's just the right thing to do for the public. So continue to educate our members on that. So I appreciate the Sheriff's Association sharing that data. Also continuing to track federal legislation, what will be the next, maybe, federal response to COVID-19. The House and Senate have passed or are considering legislation, at least quite a bit different, but we still continue to monitor that and advocate through our National Association and directly with our U.S. senators and congressional delegation on what we'd like to see in that legislation. And I'm sure the governor's office is doing the same thing on that. And as they had mentioned, it has to be a COVID-related expense under the current statute, but we are advocating that perhaps some of that money be eligible for revenue recovery, which would help us and would help the state with some guardrails around there that I think both sides are willing to accept. So continuing to monitor that. And we also are continuing to monitor the opioid lawsuit, national opioid lawsuit, if there's going to be a settlement from that. Again, that may be something that this council may want to consider. It's hard to prioritize money you don't have yet, but as we talked about earlier, there are some programs that may have a bigger benefit than others. And I don't know if it's premature to start looking at, if we do get an opioid settlement, either at the state level or even at the county level, or municipalities have filed suit directly as well. Should there be a priority list of how that money would be spent? Again, I think it would have to be a supplement to existing programs and not supplant existing programs as far as treatment. But I think that is something that we're very interested in, and maybe even trying to get it in statute, that if there's a settlement, again, it has to supplement existing funding and can't supplant it when it comes to treatment facilities or treatment programs. And then finally, this would be of interest to the judges. We're just now starting to talk about this in a broader sense amongst our members. But we're starting to run into a lot of concern when new courts are created because of the additional expense to the county. And usually the courts committee takes into consideration letters of support from council and commissioners for the creation of new courts, which of course helps tremendously with the backlog of cases. But counties aren't eligible for what we call a levy adjustment when they take on that new responsibility of a court. So we're starting to get some counties asking us to look into that and to talk to legislators about that. So if a new court is created, there's some type of levy adjustment locally that the county can vote in to help make sure they have the personnel have revenue for the new personnel required to help operate the court. So again, we're not very far along in that discussion yet, but I do think it could be of interest to the judiciary. So, and with that, I'll finish up, but thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, David. As always, that's a lot of good information. Any of the members of the council have questions for David? All right. Hearing none, I'd now ask for a report out from Kirsten Haney on behalf of the State Budget Office. Kirsten?
Thanks, Justice Goff. I really don't have much to share besides what I did earlier regarding what we're anticipating budget development to look like. Along those lines, agencies are required by September 1st per statute to have their budgets in. So after that date, we'll start going through a meeting with agencies and really kind of, building this puzzle piece to the budget. And like I said, September, we anticipate a revenue forecast to come in just to see where things are at. And then there's another one in December. But other than that, that's pretty much everything we have going on our end, along with, also trying to learn more guidance and hopefully get some direction on the CARES Act in terms of flexibility with it.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Thanks.
I now ask for a report from Adam McQueen on behalf of the Probation Officers Professional Association of Indiana. Adam?
Thank you, Justice Goff. The Probation Officers Professional Association of Indiana really continues to focus on providing training opportunities for community supervision agencies across the state, including providing scholarships for an upcoming national conference, as well as we've got a virtual training slated for mid-September. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd next call on Ralph Watson for a report on behalf of the Association of Community Corrections Act Counties. Ralph?
Yes, thank you, Justice Goff. Many of our agencies are looking about daily for creative ways to continue to provide intensive supervision with challenges from the pandemic. I know that the level of services that each of the county agencies are able to provide varies around the state depending on the resources they have available, as well as some of the direction they're receiving from their local health departments or their Board of Commissioners and their advisory board. One of the bigger concerns among many of our agencies are the grant funds only fund a portion of our budget. In fact, many of our counties, it might fund 50% or less than 50% of our budget. For ours, it's like 38%. Well, of course, they're looking for ways to keep costs down because with everything going on with the pandemic, with the number of people we're supervising, either losing their job or working a lot fewer hours, then fees, which is probably the second highest way we fund our budget, is they're decreasing. Now, many of those counties have some reserves that they can look at to get them through this very challenging time. But I know that some of the smaller counties, especially, that reserve is quite small. And some of our residential facilities are really being challenged right now as state continues to open up, because many of them are living in congregate living environments, day rooms, and dormitory style housing. And it's quite challenging to social distance in any way. And remembering that these individuals don't stay with us the whole 24 hours, they're going in and out to work. So they're being exposed to a lot of possibilities out in the community, and we're trying to manage that as they come back in and out of the facility on a daily basis.
Well, thank you, Ralph. Appreciate the report. I'd next call on Devin McDonald for a report out from the Indiana Criminal Justice Institute.
Thank you, Justice Goff. I kind of just wanted to touch base on something that Steve Luce had alluded to earlier regarding our work and the requirements under Senate Enrolled Act 256 from this last session. For those of you that don't know, or I'll explain it here in a little bit of detail, the bill was introduced by Senator Cook and passed during session. It requires CJI to submit a report to the Legislative Council on the following areas. Defendants released on their own recognizance, and of those offenders, the number of offenders that are rearrested before the disposition of that particular case. Also, the number of defendants released on $1,000 or less money bail, and again, the subsequent number that are rearrested before the disposition. The report that is due on October 1st of 2021, then what the statute requires is that we submit the report for the entire state, each county, each circuit, superior city, and town court or subdivision thereof, if available. So as you can imagine, that is a pretty substantial amount of data statewide that we'd have to take a look at. So in order to do that, we've kind of already started looking at the process, and we recently had, as Steve mentioned, a phone call with Judicial Administration, the Sheriff's Association, and CJI to start talking about how we can get that process going. On the call, we had Christine Reynolds, who's my research director, as well as Mary Kay and Steve, and then Galen, Mary Kay, I'll have to fill it in. I don't remember Galen's last name. Thank you. Who is kind of their Odyssey guru that helps pull data from Odyssey. And so what we're going to do to get this ball rolling is we're going to take a look at a couple of counties that we've already met with the sheriffs, and then a couple potential counties from southern Indiana, a couple of which are EBDM counties, to kind of try to start to get a picture of what that data universe looks like, and then how we can measure the data, what we can actually get from potential data sources of either the JMS systems at the jail, Odyssey, and potentially down the road, we'll probably get with IPAC to talk about the availability of potential charging information from PCMS as well. Some of the issues in those conversations that we've identified as possible, I wouldn't call them roadblocks as much as maybe speed bumps, are the amount of data that we have, and that it's going to have to be in a secure environment, because really the only way to look at this information is at a per person basis. So we'll have to have some identifying information from the JMS systems, as well as Odyssey and potentially PCMS as well. CJI is already in the process of spooling up a secured server for other purposes, but we can also use it for this as well, and then running through the data. So we've already met with CJI, we've already met with Boone County and Hendricks County, and have the sheriffs in those counties, and have some processes in place to start getting some information from them. Hoping to have a conversation with Sheriff Branham and Lawrence County on Friday to get the ball rolling there as well. And then hopefully with Sheriff Swain in Monroe County shortly thereafter. Once we have those conversations, and then we can get some of that information from Judicial Administration about the Odyssey level, then we'll really have a better picture of where we are. Eventually, we would like to possibly meet with Senator Cook on that the report ahead of time, and just kind of show them where we are and where we're going with it. But unfortunately, because of the data limitations that we have, we won't be able to make the report or produce the report in its entirety yet, and next year. We just won't have the processes in place by then. So that's kind of where we are right now. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Devin. Are there any questions for Devin from members of the council? Well, Devin, Mary Kay was kind enough to bring me up to speed with the report out you just made earlier this week. And it sounds as though, although it's a significant challenge, you all are coming together and finding a solution to the extent that one can be had. So we appreciate the effort and we look forward to seeing what you find out. Thank you.
Thank you.
A next call on Mary Kay Hudson for a report out on behalf of the Office of Judicial Administration.
Thank you, Justice Goff. So I had mentioned previously during our discussion that Criminal Rule 26 was implemented fully statewide January 1st of 2020. And since then we have had, as well as our pretrial rules for certification that were adopted by the Supreme Court. So since then, we have had 29 counties who have identified themselves as either actively seeking certification and in the midst of submitting an application, or they're in the planning process for a certified pretrial services program and intend to seek certification. We're really excited about that. And then related to the pretrial services and the Supreme Court and the rules for certification, the Supreme Court did establish a judicial conference committee on pretrial services. That will serve in a very similar function as the pretrial committee did under EBDM. Judge Spitzer is chairing that group. And the Supreme Court also appointed various members from our stakeholder agencies to serve as members of the pretrial committee as well. So the membership of the committee, will reflect the local stakeholder representation that we would recommend at the local level. So we have Sheriff's Association, Jay from DMHA, a representative from IPAC, and PD Council, and several pretrial directors from local jurisdictions, as well as judges who are either implementing or overseeing their pretrial services programs. So we're really excited about that, and we're just looking forward to continuing to expand pretrial. Related to that, we have a couple of reports that have recently been published or are in the process of continued review and will soon be published on our pretrial pilot project, as well as a separate NIJ, National Institute of Justice funded study on release using risk assessment relative to release pre-risk assessment. So we've got some really exciting things to report there. Those reports, to the extent that they've been approved by the pretrial committee, are posted on our Supreme Court's pretrial webpage. And then as soon as the newer reports are approved and in final form, we'll have those published as well. Judge Spitzer, Troy Hatfield, and Stephanie Ruggles. Troy Hatfield from Monroe County, Stephanie Ruggles from Hamilton County, as well as our research team, participated in a webinar around the research results. So if that's anything that you all are interested in, we have a recording of that that we can make available to you. And then we also had a really nice article on our pretrial research project published in the Indiana Lawyer recently by Olivia Covington. So we're happy with the results. We know that the more research that we do, research sort of begets more questions. The more questions we have answered, the more questions we have. But we are committed to continuing with the research agenda as it relates to pretrial and the assessment tool and supervision practices, as well as to take a look at any racial disparities that we're seeing in use of the tool or that may be impacted by use of a pretrial risk assessment tool. So again, we're continuing that research on the pretrial side. But in addition to that, we're also working with the University of Cincinnati on doing a validation of both the Indiana Youth Assessment System and the Indiana Risk Assessment System for adults that goes beyond just the pretrial tool. So we're in the process of pulling data for the validation studies across all tools. This will be a statewide validation study. It'll be large scale, and we're partnering with IPAC to help us provide some data. So we're in the midst of having conversations with University of Cincinnati about matching and sample sizes and things like that. As David mentioned, it's a lot of information also for our project, similar to what he's pulling for Senate Enrolled Act 256. It's a work in progress, but I think we are making progress, and we're looking forward to being able to provide some results. We anticipate that our research related to the suite of tools in the IRAS and the IAS will continue. Once we have our preliminary information on the validation of those tools, we'll have a better sense for where we need and want to go with the research side of things. We're also continuing work on some other EBDM related initiatives, including expanding our incentives and sanctions program, and continuing to work with IPAC on the prosecutor's felony diversion program. In regards to training, we, like other agencies, are really focusing on online training, and we are going to be starting working on the Justice Services Conference that will be held in the spring of 2021. We anticipate that will be online. And in terms of the invitation list for the Justice Services Conference, we invite pretrial teams and problem-solving court teams. We'll invite pretrial services teams. So we're hopeful that we'll have a lot of information that's readily accessible to our various criminal justice partners pretty easily online. And when that information is available, we'll be sure to get that out to you. And I think that's all that I have for updates.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Thank you. Any questions for Mary Kay? I'd next call on Christine Lessinger for a report on behalf of Commissioner Rob Carter and the Indiana Department of Corrections.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon. So as you know, our grant cycle, we have received 208 grant applications for community corrections. As you know, as Kirsten said earlier, we have been asked as an agency to cut our base budget 15%. You know, in an agency as large as ours, that's quite a bit of funds. So, you know, at this point, we don't know exactly where that's going to come from, but I've got to say that I do anticipate that this is going to affect our grant funding in some way. You know, I think we'll be encouraging counties to work very closely with their boards on making recommendations on what programs they, you know, need to continue to fund. You know, hopefully this is going to be a collaborative effort. We're working on a memo that we will be distributing to the council and to the counties, just kind of explaining all of this. You know, we're meeting as an agency to make recommendations on what, you know, we're going to be doing. So I will keep everybody apprised on, you know, as we move forward. And I mean, really, hopefully, I would assume by our next meeting or two that we'll be able to give some more specific details on where we're at. So that's about it for right now.
Thank you, Chris. We appreciate the report out, and we'll look forward to hearing more. I next call on Steve Luce for a report on behalf of the Indiana Sheriff's Association. Steve? Oh, Steve, I think you're on mute.
I'm done. No. Thanks for catching that. First of all, our state update on the state opioid grant that we're partnering with FSSA on. Currently, we're having bi-weekly calls with Jay's team just to stay on the same page. We have about 12 counties right now that are involved and have signed business agreements and the HIPAA agreements. And we have a training session this week on Friday to go over the claim forms and just the reimbursement spreadsheets. So that's going really well. And then with the COVID-19, the sheriffs are still doing an amazing job in making sure they're mitigating that with their overall jail population. Next week, the ISA, we've been asked to attend a meeting with the Commissioners Board of Directors Association to see if there's any partnerships we can work together on as far as our legislative agendas. Another thing we are working on, we are really expanding our learning management system to do more virtual training. Currently, we're doing a pilot of 3 classes under the auspices of the ILEA Training Board with the Jail Academy. Currently, that's usually physical training in the seats, but our first training went very well. We had over 50 participants. We have 2 more classes to do pilots, and then we'll report back to the ILEA. But in the move that we have done with our office, we have a complete training room that sits about 60 people now. So we will be offering a lot more webinars, not only to our members, but our other state sheriff's associations outside of Indiana. A couple other important things. Our 3 primary legislative areas we were looking to move with before COVID hit was expand mental health in jails. And I think we want to get back to the table with Jay Chaudhry in the governor's office, because we had a really good meeting before COVID about the forensic commitments to kind of get that back on track so we can have a plan for that. We'd also like to look at, again, continue to review the level 6 per diem formula, and also the ILEA recommendations that was sent to the governor's office. Then on July 23rd, the leadership from the ISA with myself and several sheriffs, we met with the Indiana Black Legislative Caucus to discuss police reforms. Numerous members of the IBLC were present in person and via conference call-in. Also sitting in the meeting was Justice Steve David from the Indiana Supreme Court. The meeting was a great meeting, and some of the topics that the ISA is working on with Representative Stewart for the legislative session. We're hitting some areas such as the updating new hire background check process, increasing the use of body-worn cameras and dash cameras, update training methods and facilities. The IBLC voiced some suggestions in general support of those topics. We plan to share the draft language of those policies with their group when it's made available to them. There were some other areas that we are looking for improvement in, or how can we do a better job on legislative or policing topics. One of the areas is officer behavior and complaints. Also, a way to build trust with the communities is, again, to increase the use of body and dash camera expansion. Also, improve communication to public on the reforms being made. We're finding out, such as the meeting we had with the Black Caucus, there were several things that they had in their phase 1 and phase 2. It was just more or less a lack of educating that some of these processes are already in place. We just have a tendency not to continually educate ourselves. So that was a good part of the meeting. That was very positive, that we're trying to show them that there are already tools in existence of what they're looking to do. We just maybe have to increase those and beef them up. We also want to standardize training and funding commitments, and also have more involvement with peer support programs and resources. Overall, that's kind of what we're doing right now, a lot of different things, but that would be my update at this time.
Well, thank you for that update, Steve. Are there any questions for Steve by members of the council? Very well. I next call on Jay Chaudhry for a report out on behalf of the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. Jay?
Yeah, thanks, Justice Goff. Echo a lot of what Steve said. Thanks to the Sheriff's Association for being such a great partner on many of these initiatives. I think, like I sort of hinted before, we'd like to push the Recovery Works update until we have kind of that report, because I think it'll be very comprehensive, and we're hoping eye-opening about the effectiveness of the program. Instead, I'd like to talk about what Steve mentioned. A major priority for us and for myself ever since I've been in this role is mental health within the justice system, and in particular in the jails. I had a call with a trial court judge yesterday, and it was a really good phone call. And she said, there's obviously many problems at the jails. I mean, overcrowding is one of them, but in her estimation, and I sort of believe trial court judges in terms of their view of the facts on the ground, in her estimation, the biggest problem is it's essentially a mental health treatment facility that is not set up to be one. because it's not one. And so, you know, we have a lot of things in the pipeline to work on that. We had some more ideas pre-COVID. I think this post-COVID budget world, many of them may not be able to exist in their conceptualized form, but you know, we did require all of our community mental health centers to submit jail diversion plans to us by October 1st, and that involves them demonstrating how they plan on engaging all the relevant stakeholders in all the counties that they cover. And so the reasoning behind that was that's probably the best place to start, is to convene that conversation. And we were very adamant with them that it is their role to do so. There's a little bit of pushback, but for the most part, I think the truth is a lot of them are already doing it, and we just want them to be a little more intentional about it. And we're going to look into ways to how to supplement those efforts with mostly federal grants to the extent that we can. The second big bucket is something that Steve touched on as well, is the notion of what to do about people that are awaiting competency restoration in jails. I mean, as I think most of you know, we have a fairly significant backlog, and what this results in is some of our most sick individuals end up waiting in a jail which is not equipped or designed to be a good place for them. And so, you know, we have we're kicking around some ideas right now between DMHA and the governor's office and budget about you know, funding streams to address this in the long run. But what we have done since then is we've launched a couple pilot programs to bring competency restoration both to the jails and the community. And what this will have the effect of doing, hopefully, is taking some folks off that waiting list by getting them restored to competency either in the jails or in the community to help move that waiting list a little bit. I think our next challenge there is how do we line that up with the work going on with EBDM in terms of determining who should be a good candidate for community-based restoration. You know, so who can we safely release to the community and continue to provide them services there instead of having them wait in jail or wait for a spot in our hospitals. And then the final thing I'll just share, because I thought it's interesting, it's not really related necessarily directly to the work of this commission, but I think it is in a lot of ways too. DMHA launched a crisis counseling program towards the end of July. And I'll just share that the response to that program has been somewhat overwhelming. And in about 2 weeks, we had 312 completed phone calls, and most of those lasted between 30 and 60 minutes. And there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of despair, a lot of just heartache out there. And you know, having this resource on one hand, I mean, we're very lucky, and we've been able to, I think, intervene and help a lot of folks. But I think it's also somewhat sobering to take a look at just some of the what's going on. I think that you know, we a lot of times focus on this and very rightly so on the public health and economic implications of the pandemic, but you know, overdoses are up, mental health issues are up, calls to suicide hotlines are up, and the effects of that will reverberate long after the public health crisis is over. So I just think we all need to be cognizant of that.
Jay, thank you for your report. I'm glad you're with us today. I look forward to meeting with you next week and with Sheriff Clark about the mapping exercise by the National Center for State Courts. And hopefully we can figure out a way to support some of the initiatives and the efforts that you all are taking along with the governor to improve our courts and our community's response to people with mental illness. So I look forward to continuing this discussion with you, and thank you very much for all the work you're doing. I'd next call on Chris Naylor for a report on behalf of the Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council.
Thank you, Justice Goff. From an agency level, our primary mission is to train prosecutors. And so we've been training our 700 or so prosecutors and deputy prosecutors virtually over the last several weeks and months, and holding weekly webinars. And so we'll offer, I think, over 30 hours of continuing legal education to our members. And we appreciate the Supreme Court adjusting that rule, allowing for more remote learning in 2020, and perhaps we'll see that in future years. So we appreciate that. Prosecutors have been focused on keeping their staffs safe, and now there have been jury trials held across the state in the last several weeks. There are a few counties who've initiated that. Tippecanoe County stands out as perhaps a good model, and the way they've conducted jury selection in a larger facility, down the street from the courthouse. They get a jury selected, and then they bring the jurors back to the courthouse. They also had a good sample juror questionnaire regarding COVID. And so in addition to that, IPAC, along with the Public Defenders Council, worked together to look at a juror questionnaire that could perhaps be used statewide that would ask questions specifically about the impact of COVID on potential jurors. And, the judge and attorneys can receive those questionnaires in advance of trial and perhaps reduce the traffic flow in the courthouse when selecting a jury. So those are some of the ways that we've reacted and responded. To follow up on Jay's comments, looking at the challenges for all of us, and I'm sure all of us, you've seen it in your different areas of work, but I think it was reported last week that the Indiana Commission to Combat Drug Abuse, a staggering statistic of a 60% increase in the use of Narcan in 2020, which just, that really talks to the challenges that we face in reducing recidivism, the level of despair that folks are facing, and with the economic impact to families. As Jay said, that will likely reverberate for months and perhaps years to come. And so we have yet to really take an inventory of the full scale of the impact to our state. So those are some of the things that we're concerned about and focused on.
Well, Chris, thank you for that report. My colleagues and I continue to appreciate all of the work that you're doing on behalf of Indiana prosecutors and partnering with us as we confront these significant challenges. Thank you. I'd next call on Bernice Corley on behalf of the Public Defender Council. Bernice?
Thank you, Justice. I'll be quick. In terms of relevant updates, as Chris said, our agency also provides training to public defenders. When COVID struck or really hit our state, the council had planned a statewide 3-location training on Criminal Rule 26 and first appearance advocacy, but which had to be canceled. We have reformulated the training to be more webinar friendly, meaning something shorter that people can watch and learn from. So we'll be giving that training August 26th to our public defenders. And as Chris said, our agency has done the same. We've converted all of our trainings to webinars to be safe. So they're all free, easy to access, and we very much appreciate the Supreme Court increasing the number of hours of remote learning. I did have a couple questions for prior people who reported. I'm not that quick with my with my mute button. But Justice, if it's okay, can I just ask a question to Ralph?
Certainly.
Ralph, and this is going to seem counterintuitive to what you shared, but has the community corrections programs considered or thought about relieving some of the cost that supervised people are paying for their community service? I know in Marion County, I want to say that program either forgave costs or lifted costs for a certain number of months. I can't remember how long. I want to say it expired in July, so it was like from March to July, but has there been discussion about that with Community Corrections Board? And I have to get off at 3:30, so just want to share that. Thank you, Justice.
Thank you, Bernice.
Real quickly, Bernice, we have had those discussions, and some counties are looking at that.
Thank you, Ralph. And Bernice, much like Chris, thank you for all of your assistance throughout this. It's just been integral to the court's ability to meet the challenges that we've been confronted with. So we thank you. The next steps, we're at about the end of the time, but very quickly, I wanted to call a question. Jay had mentioned the importance of not leaving federal money on the table. This is an extra meeting that JRAC has convened really late, and I don't say this for the members' benefit so much as anybody who might be watching, that the COVID-19 and the challenges that have confronted everyone in this line of work in terms of racial equity issues have really brought a lot of things to the forefront very quickly that have required quick action on behalf of all of us as stakeholders in Indiana's criminal justice system. And it occurs to me that there may be some value in continuing to meet, maybe a little bit less frequently, but at least to continuing to meet as the quick response group. Just ask quickly, is there any objection to that, or is there any general sense that there might be some value as we head into this legislative session to try and do things like prioritize our requests and make sure that we're not missing any items of significant importance given these challenges? So I'm not hearing any objection to that. In the interest of time, then I'm just going to leave it to OCS staff to try and coordinate at least some continuing meetings of that group, in particular in advance of the legislative session. I think that might be of benefit, so I thank you for that. I next want to announce that there will be an upcoming meeting of the jail population's small group that Mary Kay and Steve mentioned, and so we'll look forward to hearing from them at our next meeting. And then finally, in advance of this meeting, our staff had reached out to Bernice and Steve Luce to ask them to sort of continue some discussions and perhaps take a lead in facilitating some of this work that they mentioned
So I won't be able to.
Sheriff's Association and the Black Legislative Caucus to capture some of these really consensus ideas about racial equity. And hopefully we would have some ideas that would come from them that we could support. And so I would just ask them to continue those discussions.
You can just tell them.
Part of a racial equity work group. Is there anything else? Hearing nothing, then our next scheduled meeting is September 25th, 2020 at 1:30 p.m. That meeting will also occur via Zoom. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Devin. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.